On a cool fall afternoon in 1994, Sarah Klein, an 11-year-old girl who lived with her parents in an old house on the edge of the woods in Furnace Ridge, received a special gift from her father, who had found in the ruins of the old house they had just bought a charred porcelain doll, its face cracked, its hair half burned. Her father found it while cleaning out the ruins in the basement. Although he initially intended to throw it away, he changed his mind when he saw that the doll's glass eyes were still strangely intact. When she picked it up, Sarah was instantly captivated, though her mother felt a chill when she touched it. She named the doll Elsie, and from that night on, it was always placed on the desk next to her bed. A few days later, strange phenomena began. Tapping on the window in the middle of the night, despite being on the second floor, objects being moved around in the room, and one night, Sarah's parents were awakened by soft laughter coming from their daughter's room. They ran in. Sarah was still asleep, but Elsie was no longer at the table. Sarah woke up at 2 a.m. with the feeling that someone was staring at her. The girl opened her eyes. The room was still dark. Only the faint moonlight filtered through the curtains. A cool breeze brushed her cheeks. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. The desk is empty. Elsie is no longer there. Sarah glanced at the floor. Nothing. Not under the bed. Not on the bookshelf. She started to shiver. Suddenly, footsteps. Very light. Like porcelain on an old wooden floor. Slow. Steady. Coming from a hallway outside the door. The little girl shivered and pulled the blanket up to her chest, her heart pounding. Click. The doorknob turned gently. She turned on the bedside lamp. It flickered for a few seconds and then came back on. The door remained closed. The cold winter air filled the room. Sarah got out of bed, opened the door a crack, and looked out into the hallway. Empty. But at the end of the hall, right in front of the bathroom, sat Elsie. Her back was to Sarah, her hair half burned and half covered, her lace dress burned in patches. Sarah gasped. She approached slowly, each step cautious. As she got closer, she bent down, and just then, the doll turned its head. The jet black glass eyes looked straight into hers. Sarah screamed and fell backwards, hitting her back hard against the wall. Her parents rushed out of the room. "What's wrong, Sarah?" her mother shouted. She pointed toward the end of the hallway, her hands shaking, unable to form words. But the doll was no longer there. Only the bare wooden floor remained, and cold moonlight shone on the peeling walls. The next morning, her mother found Elsa in the fireplace, right in the middle of the basement, covered in ash and dust. No one understands why it is there. Father Sarah, for the first time, looked uneasy. He put the doll in a tin box, locked it, and put it in a locked cupboard outside the warehouse. He thought that was the end of it. But that night, they heard small footsteps again coming from the second floor. A few days later, the Klein family tried to return to normal life. Sarah did not mention Elsie. She did not dare go into the shed where her father kept the doll. But the cold feeling in the house did not go away. Instead, it grew stronger, especially at night. One evening, while her father, Jonathan, was repairing a plumbing fixture in the basement, he noticed something strange, a black burn mark spreading across the cement wall, as if something exploded there, and then spreading up to the ceiling. The strange thing was that the paint was brand new. The house had been renovated before they bought it. He tapped the wall. It was hollow underneath, not solid, with a chisel and hammer. He peeled away the cement, and behind the false wall was a small, discreet square, like a shelter. Inside was pitch black. The smell of old ash and burnt plastic rushed straight up to his nose. Inside, he found a small wooden chair completely burned black, a rusty iron table, and a half-burned diary. Jonathan picked up the notebook and flipped through a few unopened pages. The writing was scribbled but clear. "No one believes me. She's not mine. I told you she doesn't sleep. She doesn't breathe. But every night she looks at me. She whispers things that even the dead shouldn't know." Jonathan shuddered. He put the book back and closed the wall again. That night, Sarah heard a knock again, this time from her window. But her room is on the second floor. She drew the curtains. No one was there, but on the glass door there was a small handprint made of charcoal. The next morning, Mr. Jonathan checks the warehouse where the box containing Elsie is kept. The lock is still intact, but the box was empty. Sarah started talking to herself. At first, it was just a quiet whisper as she played alone in her room, something children sometimes do. But her mother, Lauren, quickly realized that Sarah's words were not innocent fantasies. They have a different tone, cold, mature, sometimes even a different voice. One rainy afternoon, Lauren stood in front of her daughter's room door and heard Sarah's voice. "No, Elsie, I don't want it anymore. I'm tired." Then another voice, smaller but sharp as steel needles. "You promised. Just one more game. If you don't play, I'll choose your mother." Lauren pushed the door open and barged in. Sarah was sitting across from Elsie, the doll lying on the floor, her head tilted at a broken angle, her black eyes staring at the ceiling. "Sarah, who are you talking to?" The little girl raised her head, her eyes empty, then slowly smiled. "Didn't you hear?" She said, "You'll understand soon." Lauren hugged her child and whispered, "That doll!" "Who took out of the box?" Sarah did not reply. That night, Lauren decided to throw Elsie into the basement fireplace. The fire was blazing. She watched as the plastic and porcelain began to melt. A strong burning smell arose, and from the fire came a small hissing sound, like the sound of metal rubbing against metal. Lauren stepped back. Then suddenly, the fire went out. There was only a pile of ashes left, and Elsie was still there, intact, without a scratch. And this time, its eyes were closed, as if it were sleeping. The next morning, Sarah disappeared. As the sun rose, Lauren realized the most horrifying thing. Sarah had disappeared from her bed. There was no sign of a struggle, no open windows, no noise in the night. The blanket was neatly folded at the end of the bed, as if the girl had left on her own. Lauren cried for her child. The police were called. They searched every corner of the house, the basement, the attic, even inside the wall where Jonathan had discovered the hidden room. Nothing. There was only one thing in the middle of Sarah's bedroom. The doll. It was sitting upright on the wooden floor, hands on knees, eyes wide open, mouth split open as if smiling. 3 days later. There is no clue about Sarah. Jonathan and Lauren were nearly out of energy. But on the third night, Lauren woke to the sound of soft lullabies coming from downstairs, a tune she used to sing to her when she was a baby. Lauren shakily walked downstairs. The living room was dark, except for the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Music was coming from behind the sofa. She walked over, and her heart stopped when she saw the old gramophone spinning, something her family never owned. Right next to it was a pencil drawing on tattered old paper, a scribbled picture, childish in its drawing, but full of horror. A little girl is lying on the floor, blood flowing from her eyes, and next to her is a doll with 2 eyes as black as deep holes. At the bottom of the drawing, in childish handwriting, "Mommy, she won't let me sleep." The next morning, police found a small trace of Sarah, a child's muddy trail in the backyard, leading to the abandoned lot where the 1989 fire had occurred. That land was abandoned. No one dared come near. Jonathan decided to go in there and find his daughter. Alone, he carried a flashlight, a small camera, and a metal box. Inside was a doll, bound tightly with copper wire, placed in a bag sprinkled with salt and iron powder, in the manner an exorcist friend had told her to. He stepped into the night toward the old fire ground, where the fire had been deemed of unknown cause. He never came back. The land Jonathan entered was once a peaceful neighborhood on the outskirts of Amarillo, Texas, before it was destroyed by an unexplained fire in 1989. No one survived. No one rebuilt. The government fenced it off. But people in the neighborhood still hear children's laughter and whispers in the wind as they pass by. Jonathan shined his light on the ruined floors. The smell of ash and burnt metal still lingers after more than 30 years. The flashlight suddenly flashed, and then he heard it, a childish, dry laughter echoing from underground, small footsteps, a young but cold voice. "Dad, you're late." Jonathan turned around. No one was behind him. He pulled out the metal box and opened it. The doll lay still, but his eyes blinked. A clip from Jonathan's camera. Police later found the burnout camera at the edge of the wasteland. The only thing that still worked was a grainy video clip, less than a minute long. The camera shook. Jonathan gasped. The light panned over collapsing concrete columns. Then the camera stopped. In front of the camera are a bunch of kids. There were at least 10 of them, dressed in old clothes, their hair disheveled, their faces burned as if they had been through fire. The one standing in the middle, with messy blonde hair and wild eyes, was Sarah. It opened its mouth. "We can't go. Neither can you." The camera falls to the ground. The video ends with a piercing scream, then complete silence. That same night, Lauren received a package at her door. No return address. No name. Inside was an old, burned-out photograph of an elementary school classroom in 1988. The girl in the middle was Elsie Wren. The back says, "She was the first. Now your daughter is the 12th." Lauren collapsed. She threw the photo into the fire, and this time the flames flared blue, emitting a shrill, childish laugh. Lauren couldn't take it anymore. Jonathan disappeared. Sarah was consumed by a force she didn't understand. She began to dig through all the records related to the 1989 fire, but then she found something that made her blood run cold. An old, faded newsletter, October 12th, 1889. St. Agatha State School. 12 children burned to death in fire believed to have been caused by black magic by a girl named Elsie Wren. No bodies found. A century before the 1989 fire. Also 12 children also died in the fire, and none of the bodies were intact. Lauren turned to local historian Harlan Bishop, the only person who remembers the legends of Elsie Wren. Harlan said, "They called her the Child of Ashes. An orphan, she didn't cry when she was born. When she was adopted into St. Agatha's convent, strange things started happening. Teachers disappearing, animals bloated to death, children laughing in the middle of the night. Then one day, a fire broke out and everything was gone." Lauren whispered, "What about the doll?" Harlan nodded. The doll was found in the ashes. Not burned, eyes black as coal. It was buried, but every few decades it reappears, as if it were looking for someone to play with all over again. That night, Lauren decided to dig back to St. Agatha's old location, now a burnt-out area near her home. She brought salt, iron powder, an old prayer book, and a silver knife. Under the dry soil, she found ancient floor tiles and a charred wooden chest. She opened the trunk lid. Inside was not ashes, not dust, but the desiccated corpse of Jonathan, slumped, eyes wide open, mouth open as if to scream, and in his heart was a doll. Lauren shivered and backed away. The wind picked up, and then Sarah stepped out of the shadows. The girl was still the same, but her eyes were empty. "You're late, Mom," Sarah said, her voice emotionless. Lauren stepped forward and hugged the baby, but to the touch, Sarah's body was cold as ice. No heartbeat, no breathing. From behind her, the doll smiled. Lauren stood still, her hand still on Sarah's shoulder, or rather, something that used to be Sarah. The doll fell to the ground and stood up by itself. Its eyes glowed green. Cracks began to spread across its face. From the cracks, black smoke seeped out, carrying whispers, screams, and even the laughter of children. Lauren stepped back, her hand shaking as she pulled out the silver knife. "Give me back the girl," she said, her voice hoarse. The doll tilted her head, then spoke, in the voices of several children overlapping each other. "Pay? No, we're not done playing yet." The final secret. In desperation, Lauren remembered Mr. Harlan's words. Ashes cannot burn, but ashes can hold the soul. She pulled out a large glass jar from her backpack filled with Jonathan's ashes, left after his body was removed from the vault. She threw ashes at the doll. The moment the ash touched it, the doll screamed as if it was melting. Sarah collapsed. She shuddered, then took a deep breath, the first in days. "Mom." Lauren held her daughter. They both shivered in the fading smoke. A few hours later, police found Lauren and her mother wandering along the highway near the burned-out area. They had no idea how they got there. The chest, the ashes, and Jonathan's body completely gone. But a week later, at a thrift store 70 miles away, an old man bought a charred wooden chest, lined it with red cloth, and placed it among a pile of old dolls. He smiled, puffed on his cigarette, and said to the customer, "This is a precious item, very special." The store closed at 9 o'clock that evening. But at 2 a.m., security cameras recorded the chest door opening by itself. From inside the chest, a doll stepped out,